Hi, my name is Stuart Hamby. I'm a freshman at Ivy Tech from Newcastle, Indiana, and this is my informative speech, and this is my audience. Today I'd like to talk about the growth of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, otherwise known as the UFC. By now, almost everyone has heard of the fastest growing sport in the world, mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts, also known as MMA, is a way of combat that supports all kinds of martial arts styles and pits them against one another in combat. If you haven't heard, the UFC is the ultimate proving ground for any mixed martial artist. The information that I have today comes from UFC.com and Zuffa LLC, CNBC's episode of Fistful of Dollars on the UFC, and The Ultimate Idiot's Guide to Ultimate Fighting. I'd like to start off my speech with a passage from The Ultimate Idiot's Guide to Ultimate Fighting, from Chapter 1, The History of Competition. People have been fascinated with fights and fighters for thousands of years, from the earliest pugilistic bouts of ancient Greece to the organized matches of wrestling and boxing. Spectators enjoy a good fight. Whether it's a vicarious thrill or genuine appreciation for the talent and raw nerve necessary to pit oneself against one another in combat, there's no doubt that fighting always draws a crowd. And that's where the idea of the Ultimate Fighting Championship came, because they knew that fighting draws a crowd. As you know, the UFC stands for Ultimate Fighting Championships, but when it first started, they really wanted to find the Ultimate Fighting Champion. It was just one person in the world that was supposed to be the baddest person, and they had the best style. Back then, in November of 1993, is when the UFC started. They had no rules. You didn't wear gloves, groin strikes were illegal, you could pull hair, you could bite. There was no rules, and any style worked. You had to win by knockout, submission, or you fight till the death. No time limits or anything. Rorion Gracie brought this sport to the United States from a Brazilian sport called Vale Tudo, which means no rules, which anything goes fighting. They decided to make a tournament with no rules to prove who the best fighter in the world was. They brought in jiu-jitsu fighters, specifically Gracie jiu-jitsu fighters, taekwondo, karate, wrestling, boxers, submission fighters, almost all arts, and the best people at them. It started as an 8-man tournament, and all that entered were professionals and very good in their discipline. Little did the people that worked with Rorion Gracie in creating the UFC know that Rorion just wanted the UFC to be an infomercial for Gracie martial arts. They actually hand chose most of the fighters. They chose boxers and kickboxers to fight in the event, so that Rorion's little brother, Royce Gracie, could take them all to the ground and submit them with their style. It did prove that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was the most dominant style at that point, and it went on for a long time, but no one was supposed to know that they were hand-picked fighters. And since then, the UFC has really grown, and now there's rules, because it was sold as a blood sport when it first started. UFC, back then, there was no rules. You didn't wear gloves, and it was sold as the bloody sport, and that's how they sold their name. Well, government officials such as John McCain started calling it human cockfighting, got it banned from TV, and they weren't making any money. So they had to try to get states' approval, and they had to start implementing rules. Well, one rule they tried to implement was they had to add gloves. So one of my props is a pair of 4-ounce gloves that they added into the rules. You couldn't use a boxing glove because you can't grapple and go to the ground with them. You can't grab people and choke or anything. I've used these gloves in combat. All they're used for is to protect the fighter's knuckles. They're really thin, just 4 ounces, and you can still grapple with them, unlike a boxing glove. They also added rounds, weight classes. There's no growing strikes anymore, and no biting or pulling hair. So they had to add a whole bunch of rules, but that wasn't enough. Because of the government officials called it human cockfighting and made it so bad in everyone's eyes that the original owners, they didn't want to be part of it anymore because they were losing so much money. They decided to sell out in 2001 to the Fertitta brothers and Dana White. The Fertitta brothers were the money behind the project. They bought the place for $2 million and put Dana White in charge. Now, they already invested $2 million in a dying company, which brings the question, how much money would change your life? $2 million? That change your life? How about $40 million? Because that's how much the UFC and Dana White put the Fertitta brothers in debt in only 4 years. They lost $40 million plus because they had $2 million and they spent another $40 million trying to grow it. And from 2001 to 2005, that's how much money they lost, until they decided to put together a reality TV show called The Ultimate Fighter. They thought this would bring in fans and show people what Ultimate Fighting was all about. Luckily, it was a success. The show aired once a week for 6 weeks, and it had 16 fighters, 2 different weight classes, and they fought against each other every week, and it showed their lifestyles, and they're more than just thugs and street fighters. They're actually well-trained martial artists and professional athletes. They do this for a living. It's how they feed their children and feed themselves. Some people watched the show. It grew a little bit with the show, but they really didn't start making any progress until the Ultimate Fighter finale won during Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner's final match. During that fight, halfway through the fight, the ratings on Spike TV doubled because people were picking up their phone, calling people saying, hey, you got to turn it to this show and watch this fight. It's awesome. It's the best thing I've ever seen. And they started, after that, they were putting on shows all the time. You know, people loved it. They were paying for pay-per-views. In the States, were starting to become sanctioned. They were able to go to different states, and now they go to different countries. It's grown really fast. Now the UFC has hosted over 100 shows, close to 150 counting their fight nights and Ultimate Fighter finales, and they went from $40 million in debt in 4 years to making $40 million almost monthly, easily just putting on one show. And they put on anywhere from 12 to 14 shows a year. UFC President Dana White believes that they have not reached their potential at all, even considering these numbers. They've went up 70% in ratings in just 5 years. That's 40% more than any other sport. I think the second was NASCAR, and they went up 30% in the last 5 years. UFC's went up 70% in ratings. And they still think they're not growing fast enough. It is the fastest growing sport in the world, and it's going to keep growing because of that mentality that they think that they have not reached their potential. Fighters are making no less than $3,000 a fight, up to $1.5 million a fight. So it's really growing for fighters too, and they have over 100 fighters on contract. They put on these shows monthly now. They keep growing. They're getting sponsors. They now have Fortune 500 company sponsors, and the sport continues to grow. That's how much they've grown in just less than 10 years. They've turned into a multi-billion-dollar company. That's how UFC has grown. Thank you.